Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, your Kings insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, Mr. Brenden Nunes. Brenden, what's going on? You have all kinds of titles. So we've got the Kings Herald, we've got the Kings Pulse podcast, we've got you're probably going to win some sort of Rookie of the Year trophy, even though we don't really do that. But Rookie of the Year media trophy. But what's going on, Brenden?
Well, now I'm expecting a trophy, James, but I'll take like some sort of
Everyone
Kings
your
Beat
age
merch, I
expects.
guess.
Everyone your age expects a trophy, Brenden.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I'm doing good, James. I'm rejuvenated in watching some Kings basketball. There's new things to look for, which I think has me intrigued. Even if that Brooklyn game wasn't their best showing, I think they're just being this newness to the roster. Post-trade deadline is exciting for me. So I'm good. Thanks for having me on, man.
I saw what you did there. Some newness to the roster. Brenden Nunes.
That was intentional, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was. All right, so before we get started with the show, we've got so much ground to cover in the show, but also other stuff to cover outside of the show. So if you're watching on YouTube, first things first, go down and give us a thumbs up. And if you aren't a subscriber on the YouTube channel, go down and hit subscribe. Secondly, if you're not a premium subscriber to the Kings Beat, then you will not be getting the invite to our latest happy hour, which will be Thursday night, this coming Thursday, February 17th from 5:30 to 7. And I love these long titles, so I'm just going to keep extending the titles out. This one is Off the Record with the Kings Beat Virtual Happy Hour, Part 3, The Search for Jerry. Jerry Reynolds will be joining us for the show, which should be absolutely spectacular. We're going to talk about all kinds of fun stuff, going all the way back to when he joined the team in 1985 and until his retirement 2 years ago. So much good stuff to cover with Jerry. I'm really excited. I hope Jerry has a beer or two and we get a little loose. Maybe he starts cursing on the air, which I love when Jerry curses, because I see that, but the rest of you guys don't get to see that.
Yeah, I was surprised by that one a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be amazing, but if you are not a premium subscriber, you will not get the invite, and I'm super excited. Last time we had, I think it was over 60 people in the stream, and it ends up being sort of like a comedy show, just so everyone knows. That's kind of the format, and it's all virtual, so jump on board with a premium subscription.
Jerry's got some Indiana insight, too.
He does have some Indiana insight, and I know more about his upbringing and the way, there's some crazy stuff we're going to discuss with Jerry, because I don't think everyone, he's from French Lick, Indiana, and so is Larry Bird, but they're not random people who happen to be from the same city or the same town, because I don't think you can call French Lick a city. I think it's more like a small town. And him and Larry Bird are very close, and we're going to tell that story because his relationship is long-standing with Larry Bird, and sort of watching the rise of Larry Bird. He got to do it firsthand. We're also we're working on streaming this on Discord. Again, the Discord channel is for premium subscribers. If you don't get the memo here, become a premium subscriber to the Kings Beat. That's where you get fully unlocked with everything. And we're gonna start doing this probably either on Thursday or we'll start it next week, where we're gonna stream on the private Discord channel for premium subscribers to the Kings Beat. Lastly, when it comes to the business side, we got new merch, and so we're about to open the merch shop. I think I'm probably gonna do it on Tuesday, today. And so if you haven't seen the new merch, we got hats coming, which you can see over my shoulder, but the hats aren't in quite yet. But this is one of our sweatshirts. This is the Kings Beat Fire and Ice sweatshirt, which I think is sick. Big shout out to my guy Jim over at Brick House Industries, who is doing all kinds of creative things for us here at the Kings Beat. And so you're going to be able to get merch. We got a couple of different varieties of t-shirts and sweatshirts and all that stuff. And I'll probably, during the happy hour, if you are a premium subscriber, I'll throw out a discount code. So for all those people who are going to be on the happy hour, I'll just say this. I'm going to give away 2 sweatshirts and 2 t-shirts. How about that? During the happy hour. So people who are in the happy hour, I'm going to do some giveaways of some of the new merch like this. And then I'm going to give promo codes. So if you are a premium subscriber, you'll save some cash if you want to go in and buy some of the merchandise. Lastly, Sean Cunningham is on hiatus. We're hoping to have Sean come back in the relative near future. But for right now, Brendan's stepping in, and he's going to be the Kings Beat podcast partner for a little while. And I'm happy to have Brendan. Brendan is a shiny, bright light in the up-and-coming new media world in Sacramento. And you guys should make sure that you're following him there, Brenden Nunes, NBA, on Twitter, and also his work at the King's Pulse. Brendan is opening up a Patreon for his pod. And man, it's super affordable. So jump on board with Brendan. It's really good stuff. Brendan, where do they find your pod?
Yeah, it's every major listening platform for podcasts, and then I'm doing YouTube just as you are. So YouTube is kicking off. These last couple episodes kind of took a decent jump. And yeah, a lot has taken a jump for me in general over this last year. And it was good to hear you. You know, we hung out a little bit on Super Bowl Sunday, and it was good to hear you say that that was the busiest week of the year, because I was like, this has to be ridiculous, right? I was all over the place for that week, but got through it, and I think it went well. So
yeah, it's a learning curve. Like when you jump into this job, there's a huge learning curve, and there are weeks during the year that are just like, my wife knows, just James is gone. There's a 6-month period where my neighbors think that I moved out, because normally I'm outside, I garden, I do my own landscaping, and I do a bunch of work around the house, and I'm super busy for a huge section of the year. And then boom, it's like I completely vanish, and they're like, where have you been? They see me walk the dogs or something. I'm like, man, we haven't seen you in 3 months. That's called the NBA season. And luckily, for my own sanity, it usually runs from mid-September until April 15th, and then it cuts off because the Kings don't make the playoffs and don't go any further. In past years, I've covered the Warriors all the way, until they stop, which sometimes means champagne corks and champagne bottles in a locker room. But luckily, I don't have to cover the Warriors this year, which is good for me. But Brendan, it's tough, and the one thing I'll point out is that you kind of have to be ready for this. The week of the draft is crazy. The build up to the draft is always crazy, but then the week of the draft, and then boom, they hit you with free agency right afterwards. And so those are massive, chaotic times, and at least as busy as a trade deadline.
yeah, that makes sense. But they're all exciting at the same time. While they're busy and overwhelming at the same time, it's exciting. I think that, just with it being from a different perspective, and I guess different level of responsibility I'm placing myself with all the content and conversations and such, and availability to different people, like we just talked to Monte McNair post trade deadline, and all of those things. It adds a lot, but those are, while they're overwhelming and can be a lot, those are also some of the most exciting times. So certainly not complaining.
It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. That's what you need to keep telling yourself. Which you get into a groove and you figure it out, and over years you start to develop sort of. Number one, you have templates for everything, which is something you'll build. Having templates is a good thing to go in and be able to just not rewrite what you did last year, but you already have it framed out, so it goes quicker. Man, it's an adventure, and I'm excited to see you grow into this adventure. And again, Brendan, you got to come up and hang out at the Casa de Ham. You like the bar?
Of course. How could I not? Spilled a drink all over it. It was great.
Oh yeah, Brendan.
Great.
He did a rookie move and dropped a rum and coke all over my bar. Yeah, but I mean, look, it happens, right? It happens.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into this, Brendan. I'm just gonna throw it to you here. Is that your first official press conference with Monte McNair live?
I had him, yes, because I did the Zoom call when it was the Walton and Gentry swap, but I did not see him in person.
Okay, and what were your takeaways? What was it the thing that stood out to you like right away? Is there anything that just popped?
I think that like Monty has this almost awkwardness to him. He seems like a very smart guy. It's nothing to do with that. I just think that personality wise, you're not getting much out of him. You almost get the feeling of like if Monty didn't have to do these pressers, that he wouldn't. I mean, the things that he says when it comes to that like they're not being short sighted, that the idea is that there are people that they acquired that fit the culture that they're trying to build that will go into years past this, that if they happen to win out and go to the play-in in these next 23, 24, 25 games, whatever it was at the time, that's great, but that's not the long-term goal with this team, and that they're thinking further ahead. So when it comes to Monte McNair, the person, I think that you just don't get all too much personality from him. And then when it comes to his team building, it's just glad to hear that he's thinking a little bit further ahead, even though there was definitely some building pressure, at least from the fan base, when it came to his position.
So I ran into Monty during the build up to trade deadline, and he looked bedraggled. Like he his beard had like grown down his neck. Even up on top, it had like he wasn't all clean shaven like he normally is. He looked exhausted, and I think that happens, number one, when you have three kids under the age of like 5, which he does have at home. But I think it also happens when there's so much pressure and buildup. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, Brennan, because I've seen quite a few of these, right? And I think the biggest thing was they had him set up on a stage, which I thought would like we've seen that setup before. You haven't been in there for that, but that setup we've seen it before. Shout out to I think it was Fox that sent a guy late, a cameraman late, who jacked up everyone's audio. Luckily, I wasn't like tapped into the mult box like everyone else was. But yeah, it got crazy there for a little while with screaming mics and like 15 minutes into the press conference.
Monty's doing mic checks and yeah.
Yeah, it got a little crazy. But Brendan, my thing was, when you have a press conference with a general manager and he's flanked by like the 3 guys that he just traded for. This one, okay, first of all, it would have taken like it literally would have looked like the Last Supper, because there would have been like Monty with like 6 people all leaning in around him, if we had everyone involved, because he brought in so many different pieces. It would have been like an awkward situation. But they're also in the Sacramento era, in the Vivek Ranadive era. There are other times where they allow Vivek up there, they allow other people up there with Monty, and I think that that's the biggest takeaway from this one, is that it was Monty by himself on a stage with an 8-foot table surrounding him, one microphone, one giant Kings thing right in front of him. This is his show. He made the decision. He's the one who's taking ownership for A, drafting Tyrese Haliburton, and B, trading Tyrese Haliburton. He's the one who's taking credit for Domantas Sabonis and the other 5 players that he brought in. I thought that if that might have been the best moment for Monty, is that this was his moment. It wasn't anyone else's. And I know that that's not the case behind the scenes. I know that, that Wes Wilcox had huge input in this, and Ken Catanella, and they have other front office people. Joe Dumars had part of this conversation. Vivek had part of this conversation as well. But at some point, Monty has to take accountability for this team and the fact that he is the guy. And at some point, he has to, like, for me, it was a good moment for him just to be there by himself. Did you capture that?
Yeah, I think that I went into it expecting that, but it was, yeah, to hear you say that, it definitely makes sense. I mean, the whole show and focus was Monty. There wasn't even those other guys standing off on the side or anything. You went into it thinking that we might have more than Monty there.
I went into it at least expecting other people to be there because a lot of times, like, they like to be, even what you said, even it wasn't at the table, they like to be in the room. Like, they like to be around, almost like, oh, yeah, you see, we're all part of this.
Right.
And that's not what we saw. I mean, it was media relations and it was Monty and some audio guys who were panicking because people had screwed up their audio.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it came down to, is like this really small group. And that's not what we're used to. Like, everyone wants to take credit in Sacramento. And I think maybe this one, some people didn't want to take credit because they did take a big risk. But as far as his words, was there anything that stood out to you that you liked or you didn't like about the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like we got all that much. Like I think that, which kind of seems to be a theme with Monty, from what I can tell in these last couple. Like I said, I was on the Zoom earlier this year with the coach swap, and then I've heard some of his things previously. Like anytime he goes on the radio, like you just don't seem to get all too much from him. But I think, like I said earlier, him being very clear that he feels like it's more than just this year that they're really focusing on, and even to the point of like, it wasn't that we don't care about the play-in, but I very much got the impression of like that is not the point of what we did right now. I think that they are obviously chasing that. They'd love to make the play-in and eventually make the postseason and end this drought, obviously. But I think you very much got the impression that it's about more than that for McNair, that he's trying to go longer than that he's more future-sighted, and the two guys that obviously stand out in that are Sabonis and Donte DiVincenzo. And then you heard him talk about like competitiveness and toughness when he's talking about the culture that he's trying to build. I think those were the two words that he really highlighted. And I think you've seen that with some of the guys coming in. But yeah, I think the idea that he's more focused on the future and not being too short-sighted and worried about building a culture, because up to this point in McNair's tenure, we haven't seen any sort of culture. I don't know what you would say the identity of this team is. So I think trying to finally cement that, we're finally seeing a team that he built, that isn't just carryover.
I think that's such a good point. We're seeing a team that is down to, it's De'Aaron Fox, it's Richaun Holmes, it's Harrison Barnes, right? I don't think there's any other carryover besides that at this point. And even of that group, he signed Holmes and Fox to extensions, and brought them back. I mean, Holmes was in, he brought him back in free agency, but Fox was an extension. So yeah, I got that memo too. And the toughness thing, like, that should have been addressed before, because we knew last year this team was soft. And they came into this season and did not make, they brought in guys that can be tough guys like Tristan Thompson, but you have to be a tough guy who can actually step on the floor. And that's the problem. The tough guys that they do have, or they did have on this team, they weren't playing. They weren't playing minutes. They weren't part of the plan. And now Sabonis is a tough guy, and he's playing. And Justin Holiday is physical, and he's playing. And Donte DiVincenzo is physical, and he's playing. And so I think that's the biggest thing, that we're seeing guys, Davion is a physical player, and now we have more of a runway for him to get more minutes and stuff. I definitely think that we're seeing that cultural change. That cultural change had to happen in order for this team to move forward, just because they have a propensity to just absolutely disappear in games, and no one feels them at all. How many times have we heard a head coach say, they have to feel you? Like, even if it's just touching someone the whole time, they have to know you're there, and our players don't do that. And so I think it's a good thing that we're seeing sort of a shift in that, because if not, you're just always going to be who you are. You're always going to be soft, and teams are going to know that. And some night you can get hot and beat teams, and other night you can't. and you get run over. So I think all of that's good. Is there? We're going to get to Sabonis. We're going to get to Fox and Sabonis and Barnes in a little while. But when it comes to these, the one other guy that they brought in that I think we can circle and say he's such a huge part of what this team is doing moving forward, I think that's Donte DiVincenzo. He's 25 years old. The Kings thought they traded for him a summer and a half ago. Well, 2 summers ago, when they lost out on Bogdanovich, and when they had him traded to Milwaukee for Donte. What do you like? What do you like, or what do you? I mean, you can even. What do you dislike about what you're seeing so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easy to like is his defensive versatility, his defensive IQ, and aggression on that end. Like Alvin talked about, he thinks he can guard 1-2s and 3s. I think we saw that a little bit in that Brooklyn game. He was guarding some of the bigger guys. Even in the Washington game, there's moments where he's against Kyle Kuzma, and then the next possession he's against Ish Smith, and I think he does like a fine job on both of them. So I think that like that's the clear, obvious one. And what we've heard recently is that this team has a bunch of high IQ guys now, right? Which it's so funny how quick that transition happened, because if you said that a week ago,
is it though?
no, like we know who left that didn't fit that mold, right? But it's weird to hear after what was going on a week ago. And I think Donte fits into that high IQ mold, specifically defensively. And obviously, just when it comes to getting him for Marvin Bagley, like that's amazing value. He's headed into restricted free agency. Donte DiVincenzo will Bagley as well. But offensively, Donte's sometimes frustrating so far. It's still early, and I think that he's a streaky three-point shooter. I think that we've already gotten a taste of the experience of why you've seen Milwaukee fans be frustrated with Donte DiVincenzo, specifically when he's surrounded by guys like Giannis, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton. I could see why these somewhat overconfident three-point shots that he's putting up can be frustrating. And you've seen a handful of them in these 2 games that he's played with Sacramento. For me, like I don't hate the confidence from him or anything like that. I think that some of them have been okay. And, in that first Washington game, post-game, he said that he didn't know anything they were running on offense. He was just kind of feeling it out. So I get that there is some sort of still just growing pain that's part of these shots. But when he's coming down and taking an off the dribble 3 with 18 seconds left on the shot clock, I'm like, did we really have to throw that one up? Like it's an okay shot, but I'm not feeling great about an okay look when you still have 15 or more seconds left on the shot clock. So defensively, I love it. Offensively, let's just calm it down a little bit, but they do need guys that are willing to get it up from 3 at the same time.
Yeah, like we had that one sequence where I think he shot 3 3-pointers in like 8 seconds. He missed the first one. I think it flew back to him. He got the rebound. He missed it again. Someone else got the rebound, threw it back to him. He missed again.
And he airballed it.
Yeah. And actually, I think he's had 2 or 3 air balls already. We were looking at this stat beforehand. Do you like him do you like when he pulls up? Or because I'm more of, when I watch him, his 3-point shooting reminds me a little bit of De'Aaron Fox, where I don't think the mechanics are bad. I think that where they lose it is when they're going off the dribble. Like if their feet are set, I think he's a pretty solid 3-point shooter. I certainly, he's not a good enough 3-point shooter to pull up from 28 feet, which we saw in the Brooklyn game. I think one of them he pulled up from way outside. It's like, okay, man, like look, it's okay when you're missing, but maybe we have a little bit of I don't know. Maybe Buddy Hield like gave us a little bit of trauma when it comes to this. It's like the 1 for 13 nights where you think like he just keeps shooting and you're like, what is happening? But I think we're seeing a bunch of guys who are trying to get into rhythm, who are trying to find their niche and their spot. They're trying to show up and try to be impactful. But when it comes to him as a shooter, how do you want him getting his shots?
I mean, I think it just depends on the lineups he's out there with, because we've seen a lot of minutes where it's him and Mitchell and there's no Fox or Sabonis. More than I think I would like. I think that we can kind of go away from those lineups. But I think the moments where that is happening and he's even initiating the offense, that I don't mind him like trying to punish defenders for going under screens, right? And pulling that off the dribble. I don't think you need to do it every single time necessarily. But I don't hate those. And I think that's what he did a lot in that Washington game. I felt like those first couple were kind of in that mold. But I think ideally you have one or Fox or Sabonis on the floor at all times, which we heard Alvin say post-game yesterday after that loss to Brooklyn. And that Donte is catching or is shooting off the catch. Last year, 40% of his field goal attempts were catch and shoot threes, and he shot 38% on them. 16% were pull-ups, and he shot 37% on those. But obviously, like I said, much lower volume there on those pull-up threes. And he's a streaky shooter overall. But I think that, like you said, when you're in rhythm and able to get those catch and shoot looks, I think that is what I very much would prefer. But I don't hate the decent looks of, like I said, running pick and roll and the defender goes under, because that's him like trying to expand his game, right? Like, because if he can become a threat in that aspect on pull-up threes, I think that you're talking about a different player with Donte DiVincenzo and a different level of ceiling. So I don't hate him playing with trying to expand his game, but only to a certain extent.
Okay, so there are like three different things I want to talk about here as we go through the Donte DiVincenzo like small sample size that we've seen. Number one, I saw fans complaining about this online on Twitter during the game. I think against Brooklyn. I actually like him as a point guard. I like him forcing Davion to play off the ball more. I think he's already like he's just more experienced and more natural as a guy who can handle the ball and bring it up. He plays with pace. What do you like him as a 1, a 2, a 3, and even saying that I do like the 3-guard sets. We started seeing 3-guard sets with him and Fox and Mitchell, him and Holiday and Mitchell. Like the 3-guard sets are back, but I think they're back specifically because DiVincenzo can defend multiple positions where Buddy Hield couldn't defend a position, let alone multiple positions. So like, are you comfortable with him being the primary, or do you want to see Mitchell like more as a primary?
No, I think those guys can like split responsibilities. And I think that's kind of what we've seen in those lineups. Yeah, I think that Donte's a solid passer. He was like upwards of 3 assists per game last year when he's the 4th option on that team in the starting lineup. Yeah, at best, right? Yeah. So I think that there is potential there. I mean, I think that like when Fox and Sabonis out there, obviously those guys take priority over Donte. But I think that in lineups where those two maybe aren't out there, that Donte is probably your best option. Like I think that Davion has a lot to growth to do when it comes to being a playmaker for his teammates. And I think that them kind of sharing the load there is fine by me. I certainly don't mind Donte initiating the offense.
I don't either. I like it. I actually think it might even take away some of the bad shots if he has more responsibilities to get his teammates involved and get everybody else, kind of flowing. I think that might actually help him. Okay, so that brings me to question number 2. Starter or off the bench? Because we've seen a lot of him with Mitchell, and that's like crazy fun. But I kind of like the idea of crazy fun in the starting lineup myself. I don't know, where are you at with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would start Donte. I think that you could start DiVincenzo and Holiday. But between the two, I'm leaning towards DiVincenzo. And then in that, Harkless would be the one that gets moved to the bench. Harkless isn't giving you that much when it comes to rebounding. Like that's what he provides with his size. And obviously there is the defense and him being the low man. I think that Alvin's talked about him being the best low man defensively on the team, Harkless that is. But I think the DiVincenzo should be in the starting lineup, whether that be next to Holiday or in place of Holiday. And yeah, I mean, I think that I like what he provides. It gives him more opportunities to be in that catch and shoot role offensively, but also be a secondary initiator or a guy that can kind of hit the paint and make plays from there when it gets swung to him in an advantageous situations that Fox or Sabonis has created, and let him focus more on being a disruptor and playmaker on the defensive end of the floor. So I certainly think that Donte should be starting. I thought that he would be right away, to be honest.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm with you. I think I asked Alvin, is he gonna, what's he gonna do? Is there a chance for that role to change? And the answer was yes. There's a chance for that role to change. We don't know what that looks like, but there is a chance for that role to change. And I mean, again, I think this team, the high level, like when you add a high level player like Sabonis, everyone else has to step up. And then you're also going to rely on other guys to play, guys that you know are veteran players to fill roles. And, the fact that Harrison Barnes can play the 3 or the 4, I think is huge. The fact that he hasn't been playing more 4, I think that's a huge disservice to this team. This team has to go away from either young guys get it and they start doing what they need to do right away. And it's not just how many dunks you get. A lot of times it's about, are you holding your own defensively? Does James Johnson kick your ass every single time he gets the ball? And that's unacceptable. And we saw that in the Brooklyn game from Chimezie Metu. And so again, this isn't a knock on Chimezie as much as he's got to continue to grow. I need to see more Harrison Barnes at the 4. And that I need to see more 3-guard sets if that's what you can do, especially with Holiday and DiVincenzo's ability to play that the 2 and the 3. And then I need to see more Barnes at the 4 and less of other players. And that doesn't I'm okay with Mo Harkless starting because he gives you much better length. But I want Mo Harkless starting at the 3, and even if he still has to hit shots, because if not, this team, I think that's what we're starting to see. Teams are like, oh, well, let's just clog the paint. And not only will we take away Fox's running lanes, we'll take away Sabonis's passing lanes. There are no cutters when everyone's just packed in the paint. There's no open opportunity. So I guess it brings me to my last question about Donte. He is a restricted free agent this summer. He has the same qualifying offers as Mr. Bagley if Bagley doesn't reach the starter criteria, which I don't think there's any way Bagley reaches the starter criteria, which we don't have to worry about anymore anyways because Marvin Bagley's no longer a member of the Sacramento Kings. But when it comes to DiVincenzo very specifically, his qualifying offers like $6.6 million. What do you think he's going to get in free agency? And I know what people thought he would get, but what they thought he would get and what he will get after the injury and everything else, I think they're two totally different things. I've got a number in my head, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that it's hard to identify who would be comparable guys. I almost want to go to a Joe Ingles, Jake Crowder, and even then, I mean, there's a lot of difference between those two. It's hard. I think a lot does depend on how he closes this year because he's going to have a lot more opportunity. We're going to get to see how he's kind of recovering from this ankle injury that he went through. I think that you're talking around $10 million. I think a 4-year, 4-year, $40 million deal to me sounds about right. But there's a 3-4 million in either direction that I still feel like could be up in the air based on how this year closes.
Yeah, I get what you're saying right there. I'm thinking more like 324 with a team option for a 4th year, or even a player option for a 4th year. But yeah, I mean, we're in the same ballpark. What I don't think he's getting is a 448 or a 454. I think at some point there was a opportunity for him to be a guy who made $14 million a year. I don't see that at this point. I mean, he's got a lot of recovery. His injury really did come at like the completely the wrong time for him, right? Because now he's going into his restricted free agency years, and he's not a player who's on the rise. He's a player who's trying to recover and come back. And I think his value, a little bit like Marvin Bagley, is kind of all over the place. You just don't know, and it only takes one team, but 6.6 million. There's no way the Kings don't extend that qualifying offer. I guarantee you, they love that guy. They went out and got him very specifically to be on this team, to be part of this team. And I think they envision him as a long-term fit next to Fox, but I'm not sure. I mean, I think he works either way off the bench, or as a starter. Uh, and I think, again, his versatility, his ability to work multiple positions is huge. He's a better rebounder than I thought. The fact that he had 5 steals in his second game with the Kings, I thought was pretty impressive. And I was also surprised that was his career high, because just the way he plays and the players he's played with in the past, like when one of your like anchors on the defensive end is Giannis Antetokounmpo, that means that anytime the ball goes near him, like other teams are afraid of him because of his length. And so you end up getting bad passes all the time. It's sort of like the Davion effect when Davion gets into somebody, which he needs to do more of again. But when he gets into somebody, it causes other people to make mistakes, right? And DiVincenzo seems like an opportunist. Like, how has he not had 5 steals in a game before? I know that seems like a high number, but we're talking about a guy who is almost a defensive specialist, right?
Yeah, I was definitely surprised by that. Yeah, when he logged 5, I was like, I guess I should check, and I was like, wow, this really is his career high. Yeah, I mean, this is also the second most minutes he's played. I mean, this is only game 19 so far this year. This is the second most minutes he's played all year was in that Brooklyn game. But obviously those previous years throughout his career as well. Yeah, I was definitely surprised by that. I think that, yeah, I've been surprised by his passing a little bit, just some moments. And then I think the other aspect is I just don't think he's a great finisher around the rim. I think there were some moments, I think everybody was guilty of it yesterday in that Brooklyn game. There were multiple missed layups from a handful of guys. It felt like that was just a very frustrating game when it came to hitting decent looks, I think. But I think that Donte's not a great finisher around the rim. He doesn't really take any mid-ranges. He's a very at the three-point line or at the rim type of player. And in a half-court setting, when he gets to the rim, I think that he struggles a little bit. So he does very much have this 3-and-D specialist to him. And unless his game can expand beyond that, that puts a ceiling on him.
Do you like him better as a player? I mean, we're going to talk about age in this equation, but who do you want to see on the court, him or Justin Holiday?
I mean, I'd rather see Donte. I mean, I'd rather see both over Mo Harkless. My favorite lineup that I think we saw for a little while in I believe it was the Washington game, is Fox, Mitchell, DiVincenzo, Barnes, and Sabonis.
Yeah, that's fun. But I don't know that that's sustainable for a starting lineup.
Yeah,
maybe it
all
is.
Your playmaking's in the one lineup.
Yeah, all your playmaking's in one lineup, and you don't have enough shooting. You don't. I've been kind of surprised how Sabonis, I thought he shot better as a 3-point shooter, but his 3-point shot just looks like I'd almost rather see Richaun Holmes shooting that 3 than him. It looks so forced from the top of the key. I'm wondering if he's better in the corner than he is at the top. But it's a little rough, right?
It is, and he just doesn't take it. How many actual jump shots have we seen from Sabonis in these? I mean, it's only been 3 games, but I can think of that really gross 3 against Brooklyn.
2 of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
he had a nice little 18-footer, a 17, 18-footer. He had a nice one.
Maybe it'll change. Maybe that's an area where he can grow, right? Because playing alongside De'Aaron Fox, and if that's the pairing that he's going to get used to over these next couple of years and a good portion of his career, is the idea that maybe he can expand that aspect of his game. But I have been surprised that it's we don't see any jump shots from Sabonis, it feels like.
Yeah. Okay, so Brenden hasn't been around for this. He hasn't been on the show, but it is Tuesday, so it's time for Tuesday Overreactions. And this is a segment that Sean hates. He doesn't hate it, but he hates it. And to me, this week, the Kings win 2 games after the Sabonis trade. Then they drop a game in Brooklyn against a team that had lost 11 straight, a team that's totally injured, a team that was missing Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, Kevin Durant, and Joe Harris. A skeleton crew. You got lit up by the one guy on the team that can really hit a three, and you let him beat you. And to me, that was a defensive issue, like a scheme issue, which I've talked about multiple times, where the big just isn't showing even on a guy like Seth Curry. I don't get it. But during the media session afterwards, one of the questions that was brought up to multiple players and Alvin Gentry was this, Brenden, which is what we're going to look at Tuesday Overreactions. This team played free and was all over the board in their first 2 games because that's all they had. They haven't played together. There's so many new players. The question was posed that if this team is not in their third game wasn't very good and the offense went to hell in a handbasket because they actually were coached and had time to have a practice or two and put in sets. And so now the team is trying to run plays as opposed to just being free and play the game. So is that an overreaction?
Yes. I mean, I think they also just missed a lot of shots in that Brooklyn game. I know that's a bailout that I've been tired of hearing throughout this year of how much they just made or missed shots, and a lot of that has to do with a lot of guys taking shots that aren't very good shooters, but apparently we'll just have some nights sometimes. But 34% is the worst field goal percentage the Kings have had all year, and I think that they are a better shooting team from the deadline moves.
I think you and I are a better shooting team than 34%, but go ahead.
Fair enough. Yeah, and nearly 20 turnovers. I think that once things started to get a little bit out of hand, and it's easy for a new group of players to get in their head and not have something to fall back on. So while I do think I thought there were just going to be growing pains with this team. So I think it's more so that the first 2 are probably outliers for a brand new group of players. And while at the same time, again, the Brooklyn percentage is an outlier itself in the other direction. I just don't think it should have been expected that this group comes together and gels right away.
Yeah, I think the first game they had 32 assists. That was stunning. Stunning. That doesn't happen.
Second most they've had all year.
Yeah, their second game where they have 29. And then the third game, they had 12. First of all, you're going to lose a rebounding battle when you shoot 34% from the field, and you're going to have no assists when you shoot 34% from the field. If you took away De'Aaron Fox's night, it got so ugly. I think they're if you take away Fox's stuff, they're 26 for 72. It might even be worse than that. Yeah, it was bad. They had 90 shot attempts, right? And he took 18.
20, they would have been, instead of 31 for 90, they would have been 22 for
72.
Yes.
Which is what? You have a calculator there,
yep,
Brenden?
30.5%.
Yeah, that's no bueno.
And how often is Domantas Sabonis and Harrison Barnes combining for 15 points? I know we talked about Sabonis post-game, that he said he needs to be more aggressive. I think Harrison Barnes falls into the same thing. And if I had to place a Tuesday overreaction, it's that I'm done giving up any sort of expectations for Harrison Barnes on the offensive end. You don't know what you're getting night to night. I think he's a good three-point shooter. He's not going to make some crazy mistakes, but sometimes he just doesn't show up on offense.
Isn't that interesting? Because
so weird.
I looked at the stats. Over his previous 12 games, he was averaging 20.7 a game. Over 12 games, not over some itty-bitty sample size. I know over 5 games he's averaging 24, something like that. But all of a sudden you just you have no ability to score. And you allow a team and their backups to shut you down. Like I was surprised by that. So I get your Tuesday overreaction on that. That would be like there are a couple overreactions. We could also have Tuesday overreaction would be that Alvin Gentry has no idea what he's doing and only played Domantas Sabonis 25 minutes.
You tweeted it. What's with pulling him with 6 minutes in the fourth? Like,
I had no, like, I was stunned. Like, and I don't want to like beat on Alvin here because I think what's happening here, like, if when you're a kid, did you ever play 52 card pickup? Do you know what that
yes.
game is?
Yeah,
Okay.
when I got bullied, yeah.
Yeah, so someone goes, "Hey, do you want to play 52?" You're like, "Yeah, I'll play." And then they go and shoot the cards all over the room, and you're like, "Okay, go pick them up."
It's a game you play one time.
One time. And then you try to play it with other people, and they're like, "Dude, I know that game." Okay, so my point is, I kind of feel like the Kings, like, rotation, roster, everything just got 52 card pickup. And now Alvin Gentry sitting there like, do I really got to go over and pick up all these pieces? Can we just waive like a couple of these guys that I'm not going to have time to play? Like I don't have time to put Trey Lyles in and see if he fits instead of Chimezie Metu, because Chimezie Metu's worked hard and like showed me who he is, and he's one of my guys. I can't just like pull him out and but maybe I should. And I can't just leave Richaun Holmes out of the rotation completely and put Damian Jones, even though Damian Jones clearly has earned minutes on this team and should be playing right now. And Richaun Holmes is in like a huge funk, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But you know what I mean? It's like there's so many things happening here, so many moving pieces. But to pull Sabonis and Harrison Barnes with 6 minutes left when you're down by 15 to a team that already let you back in the game 2 or 3 times, I was just absolutely stunned. They don't have a game today. There was no reason to do that. And to me, that was one of those moments where I think he just got in his head a little bit about the rotations, and maybe he was getting the wrong numbers from somebody about how much Sabonis had played. But Sabonis didn't play enough at all. Like, he should have been in the game a whole lot more than that, because you have to fight through these things as a team with the group that you're moving forward with. You don't fight through these things with randos that aren't going to be here in 6 weeks. You got to gel together. You got to put these guys on the court, and especially you got to use that as a practice, Brenden. And that's not what he did. Like, I don't need to see Josh Jackson in that situation. I don't need to see Trey Lyles. I don't any of those guys.
Yeah, I think like if I try to find the logic, the only place I could come to was when they made their big run in the second quarter, the lineup was the bench lineup. Like, it was Davion Mitchell, DiVincenzo, Justin Holiday, Chimezie Metu, and Richaun Holmes. So, like, maybe we're trying to go back to that a little bit, but that's just me searching for a logic here because it's hard to find one.
But if I'm not
certainly
mistaken,
don't understand it.
I think that's the group that got you buried at the end of the third. Because this team took a lead in the third. They took a 1 point lead, and then you started mixing and matching lineups again, and you got hammered. Yeah. And I think at some point, like, doesn't he have to go to an 8-man rotation and grow this thing and then expand out as soon as you feel like you've got it kind of figured out? I mean, that's I think.
Who cuts out that rotation for you? Because we have our starting five we've seen, right? Fox, Holiday, Barnes, Harkless, Sabonis. And then recently we've seen 9, the 4 bench being Mitchell, DiVincenzo, which I think are obvious ones, and then the other 2 being Mezzi and Holmes. Who do you cut out of there?
Yeah, I got to cut Mezzi. I mean, again, sorry, Mezzi, but I need to see Harrison Barnes at the 4. I need to see that. And I mean, Mo Harkless, he's mystical in the fact that somehow this team is just much better, just like the Portland Trailblazers were much better when he was on the court then. Like, he does something that makes you win. He does little things, but you got to have spacing. This, especially if you have Sabonis and Fox in starting lineup, you got to have spacing. That's become as big an issue. I think that's what we already know this summer. You got to go find a stretch 4 or a small forward that can shoot the 3 at a super, super high clip and a lot of them. And, you got to find the replacement for Buddy Hield that's just way better. You need a legitimate 3-and-D 3 or a 3-and-D 4, in my opinion. And we can already see it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that one positive aspect there is that like Davion's shot has really come around. I know we talked about that a little while ago, but it's kept up over these last 10 games. He's on almost 7 attempts a game at 39%. Like he's hitting at a rate where beginning of the year, I think I was very skeptical when he was throwing up shots after we got a little bit of a sample size. And now I'm at a point where I expect most of them to go in, it feels like.
He's almost robotic with his shot. Like it's identical every time. That's what I like about him. Like he's so refined in who and what he is, and I think that that's where like you do need to find different ways to get him a lot of off the ball looks. I don't need him doing a bunch of his fancy dribbling. Every once in a while, that's fine. And I like to see him take it to the basket. But I also think in order for this thing to work, you got to space the floor out. And the fact that that guys like Justin Holiday and Donte DiVincenzo can't hit the broadside of a barn right now, as far as 3-point shooting, I get it. Like he's searching for things, and as far as Alvin Gentry, he's searching because his team will look a lot different when those things are actually working. When they're not working, it makes things look ugly really, really quickly. And you don't want to live and die by your ability to shoot the three, but this is the NBA. You live and die by your ability to shoot the three, right? And so I think the fact that those guys aren't coming through, but Davion is, it should earn him a look. I don't know that I'm okay with him being the starter. Other people are, but I want someone who's bigger and stronger and longer. I even had someone compare him to Kyle Lowry, and in an email to me, I would say that the one difference I would think between Davion and Kyle Lowry, number one, it took Kyle Lowry forever because he was stuck on a bench forever to learn the game and all that. But he came into the league at 20, and he had all that time to grow into the player he's going to be. Davion's already 23. Like, he's got to be who he's going to be, like, next season, because that's where you're at. You're in a position where there isn't a waiting period for you to get better. You already lost your waiting period as you were going through your college career. And, that's not just a total dig on Davion. I think he can play in the league for a decade for sure, and probably more than that because he's a guy who takes care of himself and he's not an above the rim player. But like you got to, I think Alvin, the biggest thing I would take away from all of it is that Alvin is searching because he's playing 52 card pickup.
Yeah. Yeah, and Sabonis needs to be your mainstay right alongside De'Aaron Fox. Like, he can't be playing 26 minutes. I don't understand that. You're talking about the entire offense running around Sabonis to the point where, you're asking questions of how do you keep the offense in a flow when Sabonis is on the bench, which makes sense because as you should run through Sabonis when he's out there. And I don't understand him playing 26 minutes. Yeah, Harrison Barnes is the other mainstay. Like, that's the big three, right? And right before, we're hearing about how Barnes has had conversations about getting to the line more often, about instead of avoiding contact, kind of going into it and being slower with that. And you had seen that. 0 free throw attempts last game. But just to go through some of the games prior, 7 of 9 in Washington, 10 of 10 against Minnesota, 12 of 12 against Minnesota the game before, 6 of 9 the game before that, 8 of 9 the game before that. Like, where does that go? Like, when your offense stagnates, free throws are where you get to the line. And Barnes should be good at this. We've seen that he's able to. They talked about it, and it goes away.
It really is weird that it just goes away. It vanishes. He just, disappears. But I'll also say this. It's really not that often. It's not. Like, there was a stretch here where everyone was playing poorly for the Kings, but Harrison Barnes started out really well. I think the foot injury really played into his downfall, over that long stretch where he just wasn't that impactful. I do think that his foot injury lingered. They didn't talk about it. He didn't talk about it. He didn't have his explosion. In order to get to the rim, you've got to have your explosion. You've got to be able to fight through people. You got to be able to use your Euro step and still have spring to get off the ground. And I kind of feel like Harrison lost a lot of that for a large stretch of the season. I think he's been so much better of late. But again, when you don't show up in one game, are you comfortable going into next season with Fox, Sabonis, Barnes as your big three with, other pieces around them?
I mean, the West is going to get better than what we've seen this year. Like, Paul George
It's
and
true.
Kawhi Leonard are coming back. Jamal Murray is coming back. Um, yeah, there's
Michael Porter Jr. Yeah.
right. There's going to be some changes with what we kind of see in the West, and some of these other teams that you're rubbing shoulders with are going to have growth around them as well. I do think they need more. I think that that's a fine trio, but I think that you need another guy at least the same caliber as Harrison Barnes. And I think that that's the idea here, right? Is in my mind, when I'm looking at the longer team building of this, is that you still have all your first round picks. You still have Harrison Barnes and Richaun Holmes, who are, decent total. They make enough money to be matching salary and deals for players that can be difference makers, but they're also not negative values on their current contracts. So putting those two guys together, or even just one of them, and first round picks, like I think that there's more moves that need to be made.
Yeah, this was stage one, clearly. This was stage one, and stage two, I don't know that it can be equally as impactful because I think it's tough to find a player that's as good as Sabonis. But I do think you need to find a player that's at least as good as Harrison Barnes. And if it costs you Harrison Barnes, then you need two of those dudes. You need two players that are as good as Harrison Barnes. To me, I'm okay with Harrison Barnes being on this team next year. I'm okay with the front office negotiating a 3-year extension with him this year. I think he's a good player, and I think he fits with what you're doing. His ability to play the 3 and the 4 is really, really good at the NBA level. Have that versatility. His ability to hit the 3-point shot and to get to the free throw line and to get to the break people down and get to the rim. All of those are things that I think this team needs because I don't think Harrison hardly ever plays outside of himself. And if you've got a guy who's smart and who plays inside of himself and can really, be impactful with the other style of players that you have, a speedster and then a big man that does all this creative stuff. Yeah, I'm okay with Barnes being here even another 4 seasons because I know he takes care of himself. You're talking about 30, 31, 32, 33-year-old Harrison Barnes. As long as the contract is solid and all that stuff. And I think the Kings will look at that as a possibility. But I also think that, you do need one more big piece, and it's got to be equal value to what Harrison Barnes is. You need more of those types of players. You mentioned Richaun Holmes there. Richaun Holmes is under contract for another 3 years at like right around 36 million, right? And he just I mean, unfortunately, he no longer fits. And I was surprised that he made it through the trade deadline. I think the Kings didn't get what they had hoped at the trade deadline, but they also look at this. They probably have 1 or 2 deals already, like that they know that they can't execute coming into the summer when it comes to Holmes. But his mom also tweeted out this week, and she deleted it afterwards, but that one of his cousins had passed away, and it was a very close cousin to him and his brothers, and that it's overall like he's having a hard time. The eye injury, the COVID setback, the other eye injury, and then he loses his starting job. Just where are you at with Holmes, and what do you want to see from him here in the final, 23 games, 24 games, whatever it is that are left?
Yeah, I mean, he clearly doesn't fit, like you said. I don't care for Holmes and Sabonis lineups together. Yeah, I don't really care for it. You're talking about wanting crazy pace on this team. We heard Monty say that a lot as well. Yeah, those lineups are whatever to me, and they seem like they're just kind of here and there right now rather than a mainstay. For what I want to see from Holmes, I think I just want to, again, feel like he's the hardest playing guy out there. Like, that's always what you had with Richaun Holmes, was that he was just a ridiculous amount of energy, and it just hasn't been the case anymore. He looks discouraged, and like he gets Yeah, like he gets discouraged when there's one or two mistakes while he's out there. I think that it is like an overall frustrating situation for him. But to be the energy and hustle guy and for that to have completely disappeared, where sometimes I'm like, man, you should have boxed that guy out and you just weren't putting your all into it. Like, that's weird to say for Richaun Holmes. So I think it is a weird fit for him, and it's hard to figure out what his ideal role is on this team. There are minutes where I would rather see Damian Jones. But I think that when Holmes is out there, I just want to be able to say that he is giving 110% every single time, because that was always there before, and I don't know where that's gone.
Yeah, I feel for him because when you take away Tyrese Haliburton, right? And Tyrese Haliburton is his primary lob guy. And now you don't have a primary lob guy to go with him, and it really takes away some of who he is. Then you see that bleed over, and you see it bleed over onto the rebounding side of the ball. You see it bleed over into the defensive side of the ball. To me, like, what do you have against Washington? He had 6 points and 0 rebounds. That can't happen. Like, he can't be that guy. And I just think he's in an overall funk. I don't think that he's not trying. I think it's that he's not locked in, and he looks like almost scatterbrained on the court. Like he's just not focused. And I think he does have a lot going on. Again, he lost his starting job. It's clear he's not part of the future of this team. That means that he could get moved anywhere at any time once the season's over, and he has no say in that. And you're talking about it a minimum of 2 years, because I think he has a player option for the third year. But that's a lot on your plate. It's a lot to think about.
He probably expected to get more money this offseason.
Oh, he did. Yeah. No, I mean they wanted $20 million a year.
Right.
I think, well, it was 18 to 20. They wanted a 4-year like 72, and they didn't get that. And you lock in for a 4-year contract when you don't even come close to the money that you thought you were going to get. That's a big deal. And I mean, for him, if you look at it this way, he should be thanking his stars at this point, because his value is gonna plummet. His value is no higher. At the end of last season, his value could not have been higher. And then he didn't get the bag that he thought he was going to get in free agency. And then I'll also mention this. Mark Jones brought it up on the broadcast. We saw a push shot from him. Like, where did it go?
I just pulled this up. 49% of his field goal attempts cleaning the glass last year were mid-range shots. We're down to 39% this year.
It's gone. Yeah, and mid-range, I even think like his mid-range and other people's mid-range, like, we're not talking about 18-foot jumpers. We're talking about, like, what is their classification of mid-range? 12 to 16 feet?
Yes, it's 4 to 3. So if you go from outside of 14 feet to the three-point line, 10% last year and only 5% this year.
Okay, and then from that point, 16
from
feet
4 to 14, 38% last year, 34% this year. So it's those long, like, free throw, elbow extended push shots that we were kind of seeing, or even a little bit closer, that just aren't there. And a lot of that is like him catching the ball there in the pick and roll, right? It's not like, I don't think that's on Holmes to create that shot necessarily. I think that he catches it there and is already in position to get it up. And this year, like, I felt like we saw a lot of dribble handoffs that they were trying to do for Holmes at the beginning of the year, which I don't think is exactly his game. And while some of it is on Holmes, I think there is also an aspect of, like, he's got to catch it in the spot where he can get these push shots that just aren't there anymore.
We used to have De'Aaron Fox bolt in and draw the second defender and drop it to Holmes at the free throw line, and then he would do the push shot from the free throw line. We that's gone away. We haven't seen that specific play all season. But then I was watching the other night, last night, and he got the ball where Sabonis gets the ball, and then he tried to make a entry pass to Harrison Barnes on the block. I mean, This is a problem. The Kings went out when they signed Richaun Holmes. Everyone has to remember this. It was to be like in competition for the backup center spot behind Dwayne Dedman with Harry Giles, right? And Dedman in his first, I think it was his first game as the Kings starting center, turned the ball over 6 times, and very quickly showed you that he is no Domantas Sabonis. Like he does not have that capability. Richaun Holmes, like there's a lot of things I love about Richaun Holmes. He's not a passer. He's not a passer at all. His assist percentage show you that. His assist numbers show you that. Just the general feel. He does not get a rebound and look to fire a ball to half court. That's just not something he does. Which I'll also point out. Whatever happened to Sabonis grabbing a rebound and busting out? We haven't seen that play since like the first 2 games. That was one of the things that like kind of went away. But like Holmes has to, if he's going to be in Sacramento, he has to adjust. And I'm with you. I don't think he can play in a lineup with Sabonis. Even they've tried it. They did not try it against the Nets. They tried it against Washington. And I think the front office is saying, hey, look, we need you to keep his value up so we can move him this summer. But I don't know how this thing pieces together.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, like you mentioned, it's got to be frustrating to watch the guy that's come in and taking your job do the things that you very clearly struggle with at a high level. Like we've talked about Richaun Holmes not being a great rebounder. Sabonis is a top 5 rebounder in the league. The playmaking that you get from Sabonis that you pointed out you weren't getting with Richaun. Creating for yourself. Like, same as you. I love Richaun. I think that there's a lot of things that he does really well. I think Richaun Holmes is a starting caliber center in the league. I think defensively is where there is a struggle, but I think that if you got him on, say, the Clippers are the team that stand out to me. Like, if you got him on a switch-heavy scheme, that Richaun Holmes excels defensively. And I think that he can be a top 15, top 20 center in the league, which sounds crazy, but there's a really heavy drop-off when you're ranking centers. And we saw it last year, and maybe I'm putting too much stock into what could end up being the career year for Richaun Holmes. But it's got to be a very frustrating situation for him, I think, understandably. And if there's also off the court things going on as well. Yeah, I can see how this is a very difficult situation and adjustment for Richaun. And yeah, I think there is that complication of like, while I would prefer Damian Jones, I understand that Richaun Holmes is a valuable trade piece. And if you're playing Damian Jones over him, what does that mean for his value? So it's an interesting situation.
It is. All right, so I want to close the book on Tyrese Haliburton. When a player is no longer a member of the Kings, I don't like to keep going back to him all the time. Like at some point, like Tyrese Haliburton not only is not a King anymore, there's a good chance that he probably would never come back. And it's not because he had a bad time here. It's because when you get traded like he got traded, it does kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth. And so I, if you are a fan of this team or if you cover this team, you kind of have to, you can go and watch a box score every night. You can watch Indiana games and be supportive of Tyrese Haliburton. But I don't want to get like caught in the weeds here where like what could have been all the time, because I don't think that's productive for anyone. He wrote for the Players Tribune, and to me it was like a raw, emotional, like extremely well written article by Tyrese, where he broke down just how emotional the day was, how he found out that he was going to be traded. The Kings did do right by him. By his agent did call him beforehand, and then before the trade actually happened and was announced, Monte McNair called him himself, and they had a conversation which Ty goes through, even like texting the group text with his teammates and everyone's response, and they thought he was messing with them, all of that stuff. Just what was your takeaway, especially, we're going to laugh about this, about your tie to Tyrese, because you do have a good relationship with him, and that was pretty hard to read, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah, I mean, him talking about wanting to be in the guy that changes the direction of the franchise. Like, I know that we've heard that, but to see him put it in writing and kind of in words himself, I think was a little different. Um, yeah, and like we heard, I think it was Matt Barnes said that Tyrese cried when he heard the news, and like I didn't put too much stock into that. So to hear like Tyrese say it himself, I think just cemented that like that much for me. And I think it's just it's the little things in this that got me weirdly, where you still feel Tyrese's personality in it. Where he says, the line I have here is quote, and that was that, from no way to trade it in 30 minutes. I've literally waited in line at Cold Stone for longer than that. Like I thought that was hilarious. He talks about being on the phone with all these guys, that he wanted to be the next C Webb for the city, and just all the ties that he was building with, whether it be the barber that he had here or just trying to be a member of the community where
Buying local.
yeah, where to me, like, there was a lot of great things about Tyrese on the basketball court, but I think to hear him say how invested and from his mouth of how invested he was in the community and changing the franchise and being a member of that community, it definitely was. It was a lot to read.
Yeah, it was hard. I've covered, God, I don't even know at this point. It's got to be close to 200 players over my stretch here, covering the team for the last 12 years. At least that many. And you do get like invested in them as players, and you're not allowed to be a cheerleader for them or to like that's not what the job is. The job is to critique them, is to tell their story sometimes, there's all kinds of different avenues that are your job, but none of them is to be a fan of them. That doesn't mean you can't be a fan of the person, that you can't enjoy to be around someone very specifically and like who they are, their spirit, their essence as a person, because we do get to like have that, even though it's very restricted at this point because of COVID, and we're not going in the locker room, we're not getting that full on, one-on-one, like having quiet conversations with the guys and stuff like that. You are still getting a lot of, I think the one cool thing about like the playfulness that he had with you here in Sacramento is that is something that we would have got more of in the locker room. It's more of a personal connection, and we just lack that at this point. And a lot of it is because just of the situation that the world is in. So I wish Tyrese nothing but the best. He is a very, very good young man, and I think he's going to be a really, really good basketball player. And I'll say that, and I'll also tell you that I think the Kings did the right thing for their franchise, because I think Sabonis is 2 years ahead of where Tyrese is, and you just can't keep being bad forever. And I think the Kings did a reboot that hurts, but I still think they did the right move. You don't have to agree with me. No one does, but that's just my personal take on it.
Yeah, I think it's still TBD. I like just the whole team control aspect, and yeah. My question for you is how rare, like we've heard a lot with this whole Tyrese situation, that it's so rare for a guy to want to be in Sacramento to the extent that Tyrese did. And I wonder what you think of how rare that is. Like, I know it is, but didn't De'Aaron have this at first too? And it feels like that's faded. Like, Domas has come here and said that very quickly, but like, while that's there initially, you can't count on that sticking around, right?
Yes, you can. Look, I think that most NBA players can separate the value of wins and losses versus the value of the community that they're in. And to be honest, I don't think it's that rare. Like, I know players come to Sacramento and they love Sacramento. Like, I'll bring up DeMarcus Cousins, for example. DeMarcus Cousins held basketball camps at Sac High. He paid for the scoreboard at Sac High. He partnered with VSP and paid for eye exams and glasses for underprivileged youth in Sacramento. A young high school kid at Grant High School was shot and killed the day they had a playoff game. If I'm not mistaken, they had a playoff game that night, and he was walking down the street, a football player at Grant High School. DeMarcus Cousins paid for his funeral, um, and that was not supposed to be known. That was somebody got a big head about it and went out and started talking about it in the media. DeMarcus Cousins had no intention of that being made public. Um, I think when you get to, Justin Jackson, again, he wasn't here that long, and instantly started putting together a foundation to build a uh, a place for autistic children to go and learn, and like a community center for autistic kids. Jason Thompson was a huge, huge member of the community who had he put on basketball clinics for underprivileged kids. Look, there are a lot of people that come to Sacramento, fall in love with the city, fall in love with the laid back culture that is Sacramento, and then also the surrounding areas. Like there, it may not, you may live in like a subdivision with houses smacked up against each other. Most of these guys don't. They usually have much bigger houses and they have a little bit of property and stuff. But the fact that you can go anywhere, and it's a hub as far as the airport. Tahoe's close, Yosemite's close, San Francisco's close. Those are like, we say those things, but like when you live here, you don't end up going to those places all the time because you do fall in love with the community itself. So I would love to tell you that Tyrese was so special in that, but again, Cousins went to basketball games and football games in Sacramento all the time, all the time. De'Aaron Fox has gone to plenty of things, and so I think that seems like it's a little overvalued, and I'd even say this: there are a lot of people out there who maybe didn't mean more to the community as far as their play than Chris Webber, but as far as players who are more impactful in this community, there's been a lot of players that are more impactful than Chris Webber. So I think what he was saying there was he wanted to be the guy who delivered this team, and I mean it's very possible he could have, but it's also possible that that they were they were 18-36 when they traded him. This team just wasn't good, and you had to do something. So I hope that answered your question. Did that answer your question?
It definitely did. Yeah, I was curious. I figured you were the one to ask on that. So, yeah, that's you definitely answered it. But yeah, that's good to know. But definitely doesn't take anything away from Tyrese. And I know that's not what you were doing.
No.
But obviously, I think the whole, myself included, the whole community and fan base is going to miss what Tyrese brought as a personality and as a player and in all of the above. But I was curious on that and figured you were the guy to ask. So
Yeah. And then I'll say this too, Brenden. Guys like Harrison Barnes, just because he does do stuff in the Sacramento community for sure. He's done donation drives. He's done. Ben McLemore did backpack drives where he would get a couple of thousand backpacks with all kinds of school supplies and give it to underprivileged kids. Isaiah Thomas did the same exact thing. I think he may have even taken up the torch for Isaiah Thomas. But a lot of these guys, they do it in their hometowns as well. And like what the Boys and Girls Club meant to Harrison Barnes growing up is just unbelievable. I mean, they helped raise Harrison Barnes. He comes from a single mother and he has a sister, and like there are a lot of struggles, and the Boys and Girls Club stepped up for him, and not just in Ames, Iowa, but in Dallas, Texas, and in Sacramento. He's donated heavily to the Boys and Girls Club. He does, community-based stuff where they're teaching young kids in underprivileged areas what it's like to have a savings account and what that means, and trying to teach them, educate them on finances and stuff. So, look, I think being an NBA player it comes with so many responsibilities, and we saw it at the Super Bowl, right? So Witt won the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, right? and he said something about I think he was in Detroit, and one of the players came over to him from the Lions and said, "Hey man, I just want you to know that I was one of the kids in your community." That you paid, that you showed up at our like Boys and Girls Club or whatever it was, and I had conversations with you when I was a young kid, and he said, I made it because of you. And so those are things where I think, again, Tyrese is a guy that can have a major impact in a community, but there are a lot of guys who have had major impacts in the Sacramento community and who continue to have major impacts in the Sacramento community even long after they leave. So we probably we're going to get to this last segment here, which is the business of basketball. This is Sean's favorite segment, which because normally
Of course.
he talks about whatever he wants, and sometimes we talk about movies, sometimes we talk about other things. But I think with you specifically, the cool thing about having you is, I'm going to say this horrible term, you're seeing everything with like NBA virgin eyes. You're seeing things like, because when you get as deep in as Sean or I have, like we lose a lot of like, I don't know if it's like Christmas morning, right? Like once you've gone through Christmas morning so many times, it changes when you get older and you have kids, then it's a different Christmas morning. But,
Like I sat courtside the other day just in pregame, and I'm like, man, I'm sitting courtside right now. This is so cool. Like, just quietly to myself, I'm not going to show that or anything, but I think that's what you mean, right?
It is. So in my first season, I sat courtside with Paul Westphal. I was having a conversation with Paul in pregame, and Marv Albert and Jim Gray walked up and like, hey, what's up, Paul? And Paul introduced me to Marv Albert and Jim Gray, and the four of us just sat there for like 15 minutes on the court, like exactly where you were sitting, but at Arco. We sat baseline, and about halfway through, I just thought to myself, this is surreal. Like I'm literally having a conversation with Paul Westphal and Marv Albert and Jim Gray, like sitting courtside, like at an NBA game on the floor. I'm sitting here. So I get what you're saying, but I guess that's my, what is your most shocking moment? What is your biggest like, I can't believe this is happening, which it could have been what you just said, but like there has to be moments for you where you're just caught off guard by what's happening.
It might be the initial Tyrese thing, of him specifically calling me out. And at first, the first day it happened, I didn't think he was talking to me. I thought he was talking to Sean behind me.
Sean did too.
Yeah, because he had just finished. Sean asked the last question that day, I think. But then when he left, I felt like I was being crazy, and I was still new. But I was like, no, I think he was looking at me. Like, I think I was making eye contact with him. I kind of like tried to ask around a little bit. I'm like, Sean, do you feel like he was talking to you? Like, trying to figure out what was going on. And then they went on the road, and he made it very clear. I didn't have a great question that day, but I felt like I had to ask one to see if he was talking to me. And then he made it pretty clear. And I think just joking around with Tyrese Haliburton was probably like that first moment for me. And, like Ty DM'd me the other day when he got traded. And just like, it's like those things where if I were to tell myself that a year ago, I just wouldn't even believe it. You know what I mean? That I'm just having this casual back and forth with Tyrese. And I think that maybe my very first holy crap, I'm here moment was the first day that I was there credentialed. I was walking to courtside pregame, and I don't know where I'm going. I was walking there by myself, and the directions they give you is take a right at whatever door that there's no label on. This is the media press conference door or whatever, or maybe I'm not paying enough attention, and then they say, walk down and this black wall will be on your left. And it's like a maze. I'm like, I don't know where the heck I'm going right now. And I go towards the direction, and you walk right past where the visiting team walks into their locker room. And they're playing the Pelicans that day. And I'm kind of just like wandering, trying to figure out where I'm going. and I turn around and Jonas Valanciunas is right behind me, and Valanciunas is ginormous, and I think that was my first like, oh crap, that I just casually ran into an NBA player trying to figure out where I'm going right now. And it's funny because Valanciunas is one of the few guys in the league that I don't love. But yeah, I think that was my very first, outside of the whole interaction with Tyrese and that being very cool. My first holy crap, I'm here was just randomly bumping into Valanciunas while I'm trying to figure out how to navigate the underside of Golden One.
I'll tell you this: my first year, I didn't get like looking around, like I wasn't like, oh, this is, the Kings players. You don't get like I didn't get starstruck initially. Which you don't know. Like I didn't know how I'd
I didn't
react.
either, weirdly.
Yeah, and I was standing on the court, and I think it was Jason Ross and Sean and someone else who were standing on the court in pregame, and Dominique Wilkins came over, like, "Hey, what's going on, guys?" And like, because he's media, he's like, he just came over and hung out with the media guys, and we're standing there talking, and I'm like, "Holy cow, that's Dominique," And that was the one where I'm like, "Okay, you had your one, that's fine." Since then, like I've had the privilege, and it is at the end of the day of talking to, sitting courtside and interviewing Patrick Ewing, or being at the Hall of Fame induction and talking to Hakeem Olajuwon and I've talked to Bob Lanier. I've interviewed, like, the list of people that I've got to stand and have conversations with. It's just nuts. It's crazy. And so that's a huge fun part of it. But I'll tell you, so one thing you said to me in that first saying is, you asked another question. So when you do step in it, or when you do have a player that is frustrated with you, or whatever it might be, or you call Tyrese out for playing bad defense. When you do have that moment, you got to show up the next day, and you got to ask a question, because that's the game. If you can't let them think that they got you, that they got under your skin or beat you down. The time I hit Francisco Garcia in the face with a ball, sorry, I showed up the next day, and he like, "What's up, cameraman?" Because I was taking pictures, and like, showing up like every day, man. All right, good for you. Keep showing up. Those are the moments where you're like, okay, it doesn't matter. I got to keep coming in, and I got to keep doing my job, and it doesn't matter if whoever it might be gets like lays into you, or says something, or surprises you. The best thing you can do is just fire back and keep asking questions.
Yeah, totally. And I think it helps to not put out crazy things initially. Like if the things that you're saying in the first place are well thought through and things that you can defend, then it's easy to show up the next day, because if you want to come at me, I have my side of the argument. The whole thing with Tyrese, like, sure, give me a hard time, bro. You had 3 assists tonight, but you can't act like they're hedging, because they will not switch you on to anyone. Like, as long as you're not too crazy in the first place, it's not horribly hard to defend yourself.
Yeah, you got to be balanced and fair, and if you can stand by your argument, then that's fine. All right, so hey, do you have any final thoughts?
I don't. No, I don't think I do. Nothing that comes to the top of my head. Anything for you?
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing is thanks to all the new followers, the new supporters of the Kings Beat podcast. This thing blew up on YouTube over the last 2 weeks, and we're killing it numbers wise on audio as well. We're having a good time, and so thanks to all the new subscribers and the new listeners, people who are getting in here and enjoying the work that we're doing. I hope you're enjoying it. You're at least watching it, so you must be enjoying part of it at least. And then we've got a big week. So Thursday we'll be back for another podcast. The Kings finish up their first half schedule on Wednesday. Brenden, who do they play? I don't even know what the last. Oh, Chicago. That's going to be entertaining. But on Thursday, of course, we'll have another pod, and then we'll roll into the evening from 5:30 to 7. We're going to have the happy hour. If you want to get on board for the happy hour, it's an absolute blast. And
I'll be there.
Yeah, Brendan's going to be there, and Jerry Reynolds is going to be there, and it's going to be more storytelling like what we do during the business of basketball. So if you're not quite sure what we do in the happy hour, first of all, James has a few drinks during the happy hour, which is that happens. I think old fashioned's the first one, dirty martini's the second one. I don't know. I might go back to old fashions this time, but it's well worth the experience. Also, look for the Kings Beat merch shop. Cool stuff is coming, and become a subscriber, a premium subscriber to the Kings Beat. We're growing every day, and it's been a lot of fun doing this, and we look forward to a lot more time doing it. So, for Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse and the Kings Herald, I am James Ham, your Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. We'll see you on Thursday. Be well.